Story 1. She was caught bringing drugs across the border. Then she played the victim. They were so mean. She was let off with a petty misdemeanor charge, no jail time, and a $150 fine. She still acted as if something was being done to her. If only I could see the signs. Story 2. My ex-wife overpaid the cable bill for years by a large amount. She thought it was smart to pay more than she owed on bills when they were loans, not subscriptions. The cable company ended up owing us so much they had to get approval from accounting to pay it back. It was over $1,000. Story 3. When he asked me if he could use dishwashing soap in the dishwasher, I said no and told him what would happen. Guess who came home to a kitchen bubble bath? I went out to lunch with my cousin and aunt. She had moved to England from Canada a few years back. He asked her if it was difficult learning the language. When he told his friends I was his trophy wife, I did not want to embarrass him, so I just laughed. Later in the car, he said I embarrassed him, and I said he embarrassed himself. He asked me why, and I had to define what a trophy wife was and why I am not one. I am more highly educated and make more money than he does. I am older than he is. I spend very little time on my outward appearance, and he does not pay for any of it. We are divorced. Story 4. When he yelled at me and said, "You're supposed to mop before you sweep." Story 5. He fell for a pig butchering scam and handed over $7,000 and my identity to the scammers. Yes, I am still dealing with the fallout from that 4 years later. Story 6. I am sharing this on behalf of my father, who must have thought this when he saw my mother draw. Our family was playing Pictionary with another family, and it was my mother's turn to draw. The category was difficult, so we all expected a challenge. My mother started drawing and made a very poor attempt at a Chinese person's face and head. None of us could get even close, and we were perplexed about what she was trying to draw. When time ran out, she exclaimed that it was Mao. I said, "What, Mao Zedong?" She insisted it was the Chinese leader. I said there is no way a Pictionary card would expect players to draw a portrait of Chairman Mao from memory and asked to see the card. My mother handed me the card. I looked at the word under difficult and collapsed on the floor in hysterical laughter. The card read mow as in mowing the lawn. My mother will never live that down. Story 7. A girl I was dating in high school told me she thought that girls and women who were raped actually wanted it. I asked her to elaborate, and she explained that she thought they could just fight off any man who assaulted them. She was about 5 feet tall and 100 pounds and would not budge on the notion that no man could possibly overpower her. Story 8. I didn't consider her an idiot for it, but my last girlfriend before meeting my wife randomly said in conversation that she didn't believe in dinosaurs. It went something like, "Me, it's crazy that people think that. It's like not believing in dinosaurs." Her, "Dinosaurs didn't exist." Me, "What should we do for dinner?" I was flabbergasted for a week and couldn't wrap my head around it. When she finally asked, "You've been different. What's wrong?" I exploded. "Seriously? Dinosaurs are fake." We parted ways. On my first date with my wife, I asked, "Do you believe in dinosaurs?" She replied, "Are you an idiot? It's not a belief. They existed. It's science." I breathed a sigh of relief. Story 9. I wasn't really in a relationship. We were about to go on our third date when the woman I was seeing noticed I had gamer calluses and said she was deeply concerned because the only way she could imagine someone getting calluses like that was from hitting people. I thought about my blue-collar family who have calloused hands for many reasons and decided it was better not to go on another date than to try to untangle whatever was going on. Story 10. He came around the house with a burn mark on his neck. He had tried to iron a crease out of his t-shirt while he was wearing it. 3 months later, he did the exact same thing. Story 11. He poured a quarter of a bottle of dish soap onto a sponge to wash a single pan. He sprayed an entire bottle of air freshener in the bathroom of my one-bedroom apartment after using the toilet. We had to open all the windows and sit on the balcony until it was easier to breathe. He admitted he did not have his driver's license after nearly running us into the guardrail while driving down a mountain pass. He started wearing tactical gear in public and cleaned a loaded gun that discharged into a wall. After I broke up with him, he stalked me for 2 weeks. 2 years later, he called asking for a reference to a police academy. I said no. Story 12. Everything she didn't understand was just fucking stupid. Home loans and mortgage rates? Well, that's the point of a down payment. If you pay it off over 30 years, what even is escrow? It's just fucking stupid. Why can't they just get us a house? Flight times. Why the fuck are we flying at 12:45? Wouldn't it make more sense to go at 10 o'clock? It's fucking stupid. Documentary of any kind. What? No, that's fucking stupid. No way that's real. Not to mention she either could not or refused to figure out what bills are, how much they are, and when they were due. She messed up our savings multiple times because she couldn't figure out how to write things on a calendar. And I had to make back payments with late fees. Don't dare ask to set up a direct deposit. That's fucking stupid. What if I need the money for something else that day? She was so fucking exhausting. I'm not gonna lie. The day I found out she cheated on me was the best day of my life at that point. Laughing my ass off. I was gone. Story 13. Not my story, but a relative's. She poured melted wax from her warmer into the disposal side of the sink. Fortunately, her husband was able to replace the drain and disposal. We still bring that up. Story 14. About 10 minutes ago, he began washing his hands over a strainer filled with cooked food. Story 15. I dated a guy in high school. He called me after our summer reading lists were published and asked what a paperback book was. It took me a moment to explain because I was so shocked, and he still didn't understand after my first 2 attempts. We broke up a few months later. Afterward, he sent me messages claiming they were from Jesus saying we were meant to get back together. They came from the same email account he had used while we were dating. Story 16. He told me some women's clitorises are on their necks. He thought erogenous zone and clitoris were interchangeable. Story 17. After 2 years together, she said she was bisexual and wanted to explore her sexuality. I was uncomfortable with an open relationship, but I really liked her and wanted it to work. We agreed that we could have sex with other people, but she became very upset when she realized that I would have sex with a woman rather than a man. She thought that because she would have sex with a woman, I should have sex with a man. I am not bisexual. I have no attraction to men. She eventually decided against an open relationship. The relationship did not last. Story 18. I once dated a woman who was a lawyer. I am also a woman, and she argued against gay marriage. Big surprise, it did not work out. Story 19. I would like to think I have remained married this long because I have never thought of my wife that way. Story 20. I asked him to clean the toilet. I came back to find that he had unscrewed the toilet seat and was asking for further instructions. Story 21. I was not in a relationship with her. We were just seeing each other. She told me that she did not believe in dolphins. Her reasoning was that she had never seen one in person. Story 22. When he told me our son with a lung condition was not really that sick, that he just had a cold, and refused to let me take him to the emergency room because I was being dramatic, 24 hours later I called an ambulance. Our son was in the intensive care unit for 9 days. He still tries to tell me it was all in my head. This is not the first time his behavior has led to our son being hospitalized. There have been thousands of other things, but this is one I will never forgive. I hope he will be my ex this year. Story 23. He used an electric saw to cut a piece of wood on our brand new kitchen table. Story 24. I dated a girl who said something that stuck with me. She asked, "Why do we say words instead of just spelling them?" I stared, asked her to repeat herself, and hoped I had not heard correctly. She repeated the question. I replied, B-E-T-2-E-T-2-O-U-L-D. At that point she looked confused and said, "What?" I said, "That's why." Another time a friend mentioned his dog had a litter of puppies. The girl I was seeing asked, "What if human mothers could have more than one baby?" I said, "You mean like siblings? Don't you have an older brother?" She said, "No, I mean at the same time." I asked, "Have you never heard of twins?" She got angry and did not talk for a while. The relationship did not last long. Story 25. I dated someone a long time ago who thought the government was spraying pesticides on his 20 feet by 15 feet garden every night. Story 26. I walked in on a debate between my girlfriend at the time and my brother. She argued that the human brain is located outside the skull, on top of it. Story 27. An ex-boyfriend told me it was not necessary to pull back the foreskin when cleaning his penis, and that recurring infections are normal when you are not circumcised. Story 28. When I told her how a vaccine was made, she said I did not know what I was talking about and insulted my education. When I searched online and showed her proof, she refused to believe it and told me that you cannot believe everything you read on the internet. Story 29. He blocked the toilet by putting thick paper towels in it. After trying to unblock it for 2 minutes, he had a tantrum, yelled at me, and stormed off to the pub for an hour. While he was gone, I managed to unblock it in less than 30 seconds. When he returned, he had another tantrum and went back to the pub, which I believe was an attempt to save face. Good times. Story 30. When I was 17, I dated a man in his 30s. My mother approved the relationship because he seemed like a decent person. We dated for just over a year and broke up shortly before I started college. During the first few days of my first year, I felt homesick and called him. The conversation was going smoothly until he said he had dated me only to fulfill his fantasy of being with a minor. I am now 27 and still have not gotten over what he said. Story 31. He gleefully joined an aloe vera product-centered pyramid scheme that a friend recruited him into. He did not even know what aloe vera was, but he was genuinely convinced that the company's scientists had discovered a panacea. In the end, I managed to dissuade him, but it took a lot of work and it utterly ruined my trust in his ability to make reasonable financial decisions or perceive undesirable facts and admit when he was wrong. We broke up not long after. Story 32. When he got his company truck stuck in a riverbed while towing a trailer full of heavy wet sand he had stolen, I had asked him to go to the contractor's yard to get some bedding sand, $20 at most, but he was too cheap to pay that. I had to pull him out, and it smoked my transmission. He did nothing to check whether my vehicle was all right. A few weeks later, the transmission blew on a hill with no cell phone coverage on the way to the airport as he tried to make a plane trip. I missed the flight, had to thumb a ride, and then had to get my vehicle towed and fixed for $3,000. This is just one example of many idiotic decisions he made over the years. Story 33. I was in my 30s when I saw you fixing a toilet and realized they do not use electricity to flush. That's hilarious. It's like thinking bath taps use electricity. Wait, what? She is not really an idiot. She has a Doctor of Philosophy degree. Anything plumbing related is white noise to her, and she thinks there are people in wellies who can deal with that sort of thing, so she does not need to ever learn it. Story 34. She fell for an extremely obvious money scam on Instagram, was locked out of her bank account, and had to repay $5,000. She was a young woman in her late 20s, not an 80-year-old who had never used the internet. Truly baffling. Story 35. We were no longer married, but he said he did not know what the parenting agreement said because he had not read it. He had gone to law school, yet he still signed a binding document about his children without reading it. Story 36. My former husband held a 40th birthday party for me. He invited only his parents, his brother, and his best friend. He did not invite anyone on my behalf. Story 37. A boy I dated in college visited my house for the first time. I grew up on a dairy farm. He turned into the laneway, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Wow, your dad seriously needs to cut the grass." It was a huge field of hay. My parents' laneway is about a quarter-mile long with fields on both sides. It's quite obvious that it was not a patch of grass. Story 38. He insisted my water was bad because his skin was dry. He never drank water. It was winter, he used cheap bar soap, and he never moisturized, yet he refused to accept any other explanation. Story 39. He tried to make homemade steroids and melted the kitchen countertop in our rented apartment. It cost $600 to replace when we moved out during our divorce. He won supplements in an online contest and decided to make his own concentrate from them. He got diarrhea so bad we nearly went to the hospital from dehydration. After getting his master's degree in a niche field with no actual experience, he replied to a job offer that was below his worth by saying, "Don't you fucking realize I have a master's degree from X university? Fuck you and your insulting offer." It turned out to be a small world. The hiring manager was a top recruiter and he was blackballed everywhere. I think he sells security systems and never worked in his field of study. He attended the police academy but was fired less than 60 days later, in part for crashing the patrol car 3 times and for erratic behavior. He faked his way out of the military by huffing grass clippings to trigger an asthma attack, then tried to file for disability. He posts bizarre content on social media, insults people while working as a police officer, and becomes livid when called out. He made $90,000 total throughout a 10-year marriage and still tried to get alimony. Why? Story 40. I was dating a woman who was an engineer. We got along pretty well, but she was a far-right enthusiast and I am more left-leaning, which was fair enough. One day we were talking about topics on which we strongly disagreed, like guns, abortion, and so on. When I brought up global warming, she said it was a fiction created by the United States of America to control poorer nations and prevent them from growing. I replied that next she would tell me the Earth is flat. She did. Story 41. She thought Alaska was an island. She lived in the Pacific Northwest, so there was no reason not to know the geography. Story 42. He could not figure out which was the better value, $15 for a pack of 12, or $1 each. Story 43. My wife recently told me she shouldn't have gotten a speeding ticket because she was in the fast lane. I asked her why that mattered, and she looked at me like I was an idiot and said, "Because there's no speed limit. That's why it's called the fast lane." She pays for her own auto insurance now. Story 44. I've posted this several times, but it still gets me. My husband at the time admitted he had fed our child something he knew the child was allergic to. Thankfully, the child did not have a reaction, but I was livid when he said he did it intentionally. Then he told me I was overreacting to his legitimate parenting choice. When I showed him where the doctor's notes said we were to avoid exposing our child to any form of the allergen, which had also been explained to both of us in person at the last appointment, he insisted he did not know it required complete avoidance, and since he did not know, I could not be mad at him. When I pointed out that our child could have died from it, he insisted that because our child did not die, it was obviously an acceptable decision. That was the moment I knew I had to leave him before he killed one of us. Story 45. My ex-wife once asked me if I wanted to take a 3-day trip to drive around the entire Pacific Ocean. We lived in Missouri at the time. Story 46. When I tried to explain that just because you have never experienced racism does not mean it is not real. Story 47. He insisted on opting out of the X-ray scanners at airports because he did not want them to have his image. The man was a professional internet personality. His face and information are not hard to find. Laughing out loud. Story 48. The first time I brought one of my high school boyfriends over to have dinner with my parents, he looked at the raised dog bowls we had for our big Labradoodle and asked what they were for. My mom turned to him deadpan and said they were for me and that I liked to eat out of them. The look of shocked disbelief he gave me was priceless. Story 49. He told me the bugs on my windshield were oil and that I needed an oil change. I said they were bugs. He replied, "I've been driving longer than you, I would know." Later I told him I saw a werewolf and made the story very dramatic. He asked, "Are you sure it wasn't a coyote?" I replied, "I've lived here much longer than you. I would know the difference." I thought he'd realize how foolish his first comments were, but instead he said, "Huh, okay," and shrugged, as if he actually believed me. Story 50. I was once married to a man. I am now happily divorced. He looked me in the eye and said, "With global warming, I wonder if I could invent something to keep buildings cool?" I was so shocked I stared at him for a minute before I said, "You mean air conditioning?" Story 51. My ex refused to drink tap water and insisted on refilling her jug from the store. I tried to explain that it is filtered the same and is probably tap water as well, but she did not want to hear me. I understand that water varies in cleanliness and taste. This was definitely just city water with a plastic aftertaste. Story 52. My husband, who is a builder, told me, "Don't be stupid. A tape measure won't tell you the length." Story 53. Not me, but a friend. Her ex-husband had a doctor's appointment and the office told him to bring in a stool sample. He asked my friend what kind of lousy doctor does not have a stool for him to sit on when we went to the appointment. Story 54. When she left for work in her socks, she was gone for 15 to 30 minutes, then finally came back and said, "Oops, I forgot my shoes. How on earth do you walk through the house, down the steps, and across the driveway on concrete, get into your car, and drive for that entire time in socks without realizing you were not wearing any shoes?" Story 55. My ex thought a debilitating mental disorder like obsessive-compulsive disorder was all in my head and did not need medication. He insinuated that my psychiatrist was in a conspiracy with large pharmaceutical companies for prescribing a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor to me. It still makes me angry to think about the sheer ignorance of this man. Thank goodness I am no longer with him. Story 56. When my ex insisted investing in cannabis dispensaries was not a good idea, he then dumped all our savings into GameStop stock because he saw a Saturday Night Live skit about it. He later wanted to put a bunch of money into non-fungible tokens, but we did not have the money because he had bought the dip in GameStop. Story 57. He thought the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was a documentary. Story 58. My usually intelligent spouse licked a candle scented like vanilla frosting to see if it tasted as good as it smelled. It did not taste good at all. Story 59. My ex-partner is religious, Christian. I am not. One night we were talking about evolution and he said something along the lines of, "There has to be a God because there is no way I came from a fucking tree." Story 60. 3 days after the wedding, he told me he did not have to speak to me anymore. I left 100 days later. Fucking idiot. Story 61. I dated a medical doctor. She was far from an idiot, but this was a funny idiot moment. She was afraid that one day she would crack open an egg and find an embryo inside. I told her that was highly unlikely since I did not think there were any roosters near the hens that produced our eggs. She asked why that would matter, and I asked if she meant the lack of a male was irrelevant. It took her a while to see the point, and she joked that her doctor of philosophy would be revoked if she told anyone. Story 62. My ex-girlfriend and I rented Death Race, 2008, starring Jason Statham, from Blockbuster for a quiet night in. About 15 minutes in, she turned to me and asked if it was based on a true story. About 1 or 2 minutes into the movie, it clearly states on screen that it is set in the year 2020. Her lack of reading comprehension was telling, if only slightly. Story 63. When my husband was sick, I would give him toast with garlic, butter and salt, and tea with lemon and honey on the side. When I was sick, he gave me tea with honey, lemon, garlic, and butter because I once told him those things are good when you have a cold. Sigh. Story 64. He constantly insulted my intelligence. One day, he tried to cook a burger in a toaster. Story 65. When I told my husband I was thinking of getting lash extensions, he said, "Why don't you just grow them out?" Story 66. I knew it was bad when his phone notified him that its charging port was dusty and needed cleaning. So he stuck it under the tap and rinsed it with water to clean it out. Then this 30-year-old man wondered why his phone was not charging at all anymore. Story 67. I was sexually harassed by an older man and I cried to my ex about it. At first he went to confront the man and tried to comfort me until he said, "You know what, babe, that guy is right, you were sexy," and tried to pressure me into having sex with him. Sir, I am traumatized. Story 68. He admitted to me that he thought the absorbency level of tampons was determined by the size of a woman's vaginal opening. He believed super tampons meant a woman had a wider opening. He was a married man with 5 children. Story 69. He said he would fight for his country if a war started. He thought he would be an excellent soldier, I suppose, because of all the Counter-Strike he played. He was overweight, too. I loved him, but this was one of those moments. Story 70. When he told me he was political and I asked if he liked Ron DeSantis, he said he did because DeSantis supports gay rights. He identified as gay. Story 71. I'm sure my husband's was when I flooded the house. I was going through a tough time and began forgetting things. I left the bath running for hours until a neighbor told us water was pouring out the side of the house. We realized I had flooded almost half the house. I don't have one for him. I'm glad he is forgiving. That was quite a fiasco. Story 72. The time he superglued his fingers together on both hands while trying to fix something. Story 73. She did not know what solar panels were. She had seen them on buildings and knew they existed but did not realize they generated electricity. She never thought to find out. It turned out there were many common items she recognized but did not understand. For example, she thought the cold air returns in her house were not working and said, "They are not blowing anything. Call the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning repair service." Story 74. When my husband fell for a cryptocurrency pyramid scam promoted by motivational speakers who claimed they had blown through their savings 3 times, nearly lost their spouse, and later made millions, he only spent about $500. Thankfully, we avoided a larger loss, but we were still very short on money. Story 75. When I was transferring laundry from the washer to the dryer, I accidentally dropped a sock on the floor as she walked by. She flew into a tizzy, screamed at me, pulled all the clothes out of the dryer, put everything back in the washer, and restarted the cycle, all because of one sock. Story 76. My husband bought a tub of cottage cheese, ate some, and said he did not like it and would probably throw the rest out. I asked why because he had not had a problem with cottage cheese before. I cannot stand the texture myself, so I never touch it. It turned out he had bought no salt-added cottage cheese instead of the regular kind, and it had not occurred to him that he could simply add his own salt or other seasonings. Story 77. She thought that if she fell asleep in the car overnight with the windows up, she would suffocate. Story 78. He thought children were born knowing how to swim and did not realize they needed lessons. He had 3 young children and lived near a canal. Story 79. Unfortunately, I'm the idiot, and my long-term girlfriend has stuck by me. She's not too horrible. In my defense, due to circumstances, I became practically a neglected only child at the start of puberty after my brother fought with our parents and left home. He is 6 years older. I see my mistakes as ignorance since I was simply clueless, but she definitely sees them as me being stupid. One time I was drinking a banana smoothie, and afterwards my throat was itchy. I made an odd sound trying to clear it. My girlfriend is highly sensitive to weird sounds and asked me, "What are you doing?" I responded that I was simply scratching my throat. She asked when my throat had begun itching and said that since it started after I drank the smoothie, I could be allergic to something in it. I was dumbfounded and asked, "You mean when my throat gets itchy that means I'm allergic to something?" She answered that yes, it does. I have minor allergies to 5 things and had thought an itchy throat was sometimes normal. Story 80. I briefly dated a man who did not understand the meaning of cisgender. He asked what it meant. I said it meant that your gender identity matches your biological sex. He still did not get it. I explained, he was born biologically male and identifies as a man, so he is a cisgender male. I was born biologically female and identify as a woman, so I am a cisgender female. He stared and asked, "So are you saying you used to have a penis?" I spent more time than I should have explaining what cisgender means, and he kept returning to the same question. He seemed incapable of understanding. Story 81. When he said Vietnam is in Southeast Asia. Story 82. He thought coronavirus disease 2019 was not real and that he was escaping the matrix by dropping out of college. Story 83. At my father's funeral, he leaned into me and said, "Why do they have these so fucking early?" It was 11 o'clock in the morning. Story 84. When I told him you do not catch colds by being cold, he said, "I do not care about your scientific facts," while air quoting those words. Story 85. On our first date, he bought me a hair straightener costing $300. I have only used it 3 times. He worked at Dairy Queen and we were 19. We dated for 3 years. He proposed again. We are not married. Story 86. Not me. Over the holidays, my brother's wife, a Make America Great Again supporter, started talking about the lights in the sky and, apparently, how the government is covering it all up. At one point, she asked why we can only see the lights at night. I tried to reply without sounding like an asshole. Because it's dark out. Of course, everyone thought I was being a dick. Story 87. My wife's psychologist said she should embrace her mistakes, so she has been hugging me a lot lately. Story 88. She asked, What is a dick? She was more homeschooled and sheltered than I realized, but it still left me shocked. Story 89. He can't find anything. I swear, as soon as I look, I find it. Tale as old as time. Story 90. He was helping me unpack at my new place. I asked him to start on the boxes in the living room while I worked on the bedroom. 45 minutes later, he had only one box unpacked. A box fan. I found him intently focused on attaching the little feet to the fan. Story 91. My now ex-wife criticized me for vacuuming because I had moved a piece of furniture to the right instead of the left, even though the final result of the chore was the same. She seemed to be looking for any little thing to start a fight. When I asked if this was a hill she wanted to die on, she insisted. I left her not long after. Story 92. He didn't request time off for our honeymoon, so we had to scrap the whole thing. Story 93. He did not lock the front door to my condominium before meeting me at the park. When I asked why, he said he thought the building security was sufficient. Story 94. This was with my ex-husband. I had to make him sleep in his car or on the living room floor with a puke bucket because he was drunk. He did not understand why he could not sleep in the bed when he was like that. Story 95. My brother-in-law would scam the train station out of $3 by intentionally buying the wrong tickets. They did not always check, but eventually he got caught and was fined $250. Fast forward a few years, and he had a short stint as a flat earther. I am waiting for chapter 3 at this point. Story 96. My boyfriend suddenly dumped me because I was not gaunt, that is, not a supermodel, because I was not a virgin at age 26, and because I did not follow some script he had in his head. He had a long list of perceived flaws and spent his life alone. Story 97. He hid and denied watching porn and repeatedly lied about it. When confronted with evidence, he doubled down and lied to my face for 2 hours, denying it. Why would you lie about something so stupid as watching porn? His lying to my face for hours and over the years is far worse than simply admitting that he watches porn sometimes. Geez, dude. Story 98. I watched my wife take the hair from the shower strainer and casually drop it in the toilet. When I told her the pipes joined about 18 inches away, she was speechless. She puts the hair in the trash now. Story 99. There are too many to type, but I will start without knowing the numbering sequence of the years before Christ. Story 100. When I was peeling potatoes to make mashed potatoes, he asked why I was peeling them. When I explained, he said that was not how you make mashed potatoes. I thought, how else do you make mashed potatoes? It turned out his stay-at-home mother only used Deb to make mashed potatoes. He still would not believe you could make mashed potatoes from actual potatoes. Story 101. I say Z instead of Z for the letter Z, and he called me a fucking idiot because we do not pronounce zebra as zebra. He was completely serious. He was awful and a moron for many reasons, but I remember that one. Story 102. I watched Jurassic Park with my ex-wife. She began asking about what happened after the movie, fully believing it was based on true events and asking whether the park ever opened and whether we could go there. I played along for a few minutes until I realized she wasn't joking. She was around 26 at the time. Story 103. I left the love of my life because I was attracted to someone else. That person turned out to be harmful. It was the worst mistake of my life. Story 104. My wife is still with me. I'm of the opinion that she has been a fucking idiot for the past 25 years. Story 105. When he asked me to teach him how to wash up while he cooked so he didn't have to do it all at the end, I realized I'd moved in with a child. Story 106. I am currently in a relationship, and many of the top comments describe things my wife has done. But not always. One day she is intelligent and kind. The next she makes extreme mistakes, sometimes life-threateningly reckless. Then she can revert to the person with 2 master's degrees, a straight-A student who has held the same job for 25 years and progressed well in her career. At first nothing obvious stood out, but 5 years into the marriage certain patterns kept recurring. After we had a baby, several really ignorant and dangerous incidents occurred. I began to think my wife lacked street smarts. People would call her book smart derogatorily. Usually the incidents were just odd, and very occasionally there were moments that could have been life-threatening. The little things began to add up, and we began to argue whenever I asked questions. Finally, we reached a point where we went to couples therapy and found out my wife has an extreme case of post-traumatic stress disorder. It presents in ways that differ drastically from what is portrayed on television or in movies. 1 year in, it is still severe. She still does and says very unwise things, along with many other symptoms that come with it. But it is getting better, and she will soon start working with a trauma therapist. To summarize, mental health issues can present in very unexpected ways. What you see on television and in movies is often inaccurate. If someone in your life behaves in extreme or dangerous ways, consider couples therapy. Story 107. She was not sure what street I lived on. I had returned to college and she was visiting for the first time. When she said she was lost, I told her to look up and tell me what she could see, meaning street signs and business signs. She said, stars. Story 108. My husband and I were sitting and talking with neighbors when I went inside for a minute. Something told me to listen to my husband and my neighbor at the window. Sure enough, he made a move on her. I sent him away shortly afterward. My gut had told me to listen. Story 109. A date who spent most of the time trying to convince me that Christmas Day is on December 26th. I tried to humor him until I thought he was being funny. When I realized he was dead serious, I could not get out of there fast enough. Story 110. I was discussing a grade I received on an assignment and how it was lower than I would have liked. I told her I got an 8 out of 10. She paused for a moment, then responded, So, 70%? We were both in our mid to late 20s at the time. Story 111. I love my wife. She is usually fine. After 23 years together, including 11 years married and 20 years working in banking, I found out in 2024 that she had no idea what annual percentage rate and annual percentage yield really meant. Story 112. He also believed that installing boilers was harder than being a nurse on a dementia unit. You put pipes together and have a team of people with you to do one project. I get physically assaulted working in a chronically short-staffed field and am literally in control of people's lives. Story 113. When I was 22, I got blackout drunk on a boat and was taken back to my girlfriend's parents' house. I ate an entire bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken shirtless in their living room. For obvious reasons, I cannot confirm whether this actually happened, so I decided to take her father's word for it. He seemed pretty serious. The night is mostly a black screen in my memory, but I remember watching Paul Blart with her father and trying to talk to him about Tom Brady. I'm pretty sure the entire family had an aha moment at the same time. That's the game sometimes. Story 114. In college, I dated a girl who was in the same geology cohort as I was, so we took many of the same classes. I found out that she came from a devout Christian family and believed in the literal six-day creation account from Genesis. I asked her how she was reconciling what she was learning in the program with her deeply held beliefs. It did not go well, and we eventually broke up. Story 115. Two people in college could not tie their shoes after the age of 20, and I had to tie them. Also, one person did not know how to blow their nose properly. They did not know how to blow into a tissue and clean their nose, and instead let it drip into the tissue. Story 116. He once tried to clean a small spot on our front door with Windex, and when that did not work, he tried bleach. Ammonia is the main ingredient in Windex. Ammonia and bleach mixed together produce mustard gas. Thankfully, it was not a high enough concentration or exposure to cause serious harm. He just became loopy and sang out loud, which he never does. I saw the bottles and got us outside while the house aired out. A couple of weeks ago, while he was opening an early Christmas gift, he placed the tissue directly on top of a lit candle. Story 117. I woke up one day to the smoke alarm going off and the apartment filled with the smell of melting plastic. She had microwaved something inside a battery-operated measuring cup with a digital screen. When I asked what made her think it was okay to microwave such a device, she replied that she did not think it had batteries in it. This was 2 days after she had brought the cup to me saying it needed batteries because it was not working. My solution was to remove the small plastic strip that came with it to disconnect the battery. I turned it on to show her it was working and already had batteries in it. Then she put it in the microwave for several minutes. Story 118. So many things to choose from. 1. Being abusive, his children want nothing to do with him. 2. Refusing to pay the mortgage to force repossession, and threatening me in writing to do so. The mortgage company and judge recognize this as financial abuse and will not allow it. He cannot get a mortgage for 6 years now. 3. Overspending, such as maxing out a credit card and paying it off with a loan or another credit card. 4. Turning off the circuit breaker while drilling, then immediately resuming drilling after the power is restored. 5. Buying excessive paint because he cannot calculate area, even though we had enough paint to decorate the whole house. He became angry when I said it sounded like a lot. 6. Gluing the rearview mirror to the windshield with super glue and cracking the windshield. Story 119. He said some of the most foolish things, like that he would make a great father because his cat is always excited to see him. Story 120. After our split, my ex continued to alienate our children from me, rather than accept my help with co-parenting, choosing to act exhausted, all just to win points. Shaking my head. Story 121. I wouldn't let him burn the steak on the barbecue, and he said I was emasculating him. Story 122. When I realized that my spouse was a figment of my imagination. Story 123. She told me you can only get pregnant if both partners ejaculate. When I asked her to explain, she said that if a man ejaculates but the woman does not, it is fine because both partners must ejaculate for a woman to get pregnant. I spent the next 40 minutes educating her. Story 124. Our child's first birthday party. I went to pick up decorations and balloons, but the store was out of helium. I called her to say I'd be late because I had to run to another store for helium, and she said not to worry, we'd just blow them up ourselves. 20 minutes later, at home, she had a balloon she'd blown up in her hand, was tossing it in the air, and asked me why it wasn't floating. Story 125. My wife declared shortly after we married that the moon landings were obviously faked. 3 years later, we split. I dodged a bullet. Story 126. My ex thought his new car had seats made of fox leather. Turned out he couldn't read faux leather. Story 127. We had some large candles on the patio that were dirty from being outside. My wife decided to clean them by putting them in the dishwasher. The wax melted everywhere and irreversibly clogged it. Fortunately, it only ruined the dishwasher and not our plumbing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.